Welcome to the debate. Usually when we talk about financial advice, there is this expectation of universal mathematical truth, like gravity.
Right, yeah, like it's a hard science.
Exactly. You save a specific portion of your income, you put it in a safe, diversified portfolio, and the compound interest calculator just points to a number 40 years from now and says, there it is, you're a millionaire.
Right, and well, there is a profound comfort in that. I mean, it's a formula, it's binary, and statistically, it's remarkably reliable. We like our financial futures to be categorical, and guaranteed.
It is comforting, I'll give you that. But then you look closely at the variable that formula relies on the most, which is time.
Okay.
By the time you reach that magical number, you're 65 years old. The compounding curve only really spikes at the very end of your life. When you realize that, the reliable formula suddenly feels less like a guarantee and a lot more like a trap.
A trap? That's a strong word.
It is, because we're looking at a financial landscape today that is split right down the middle between two radically different philosophies, basically how we view time, risk, and youth.
It really is. It's the absolute definition of a high-stakes ideological collision. You have millions of people realizing that the traditional path requires sacrificing their best years. But the alternative, it seems like a chaotic leap into the unknown.
Exactly. So today, we are exploring the ultimate roadmap to financial freedom, the blazing speed of aggressive entrepreneurship versus the mathematical patience of index investing.
Right.
This fiery debate is rooted in the clash between M.J. DeMarco's The Millionaire Fastlane and J.L. Collins' The Simple Path to Wealth. Now, representing the Fastlane, when I dive into DeMarco's framework, it completely shatters the illusion of the 9-to-5. I look at active, scalable entrepreneurship not as a gamble, but as the only logical way to avoid the massive, youth-wasting risk of the traditional path.
And coming from Colin's perspective, I look at that exact same entrepreneurial landscape and see a statistical graveyard. I see this simple path, passive index investing, aggressive saving, and living below your means as the only sane strategy.
Sane? Really?
Yes, sane. Framing entrepreneurship as the logical path completely ignores the chaotic, high-risk reality of business failure compared to the sheer statistical certainty of owning the global market.
Well, let's lay the fundamental mechanics on the table here. The approach almost all financial gurus sell, what DeMarco calls the slow lane, is a broken promise because of its relationship with time.
How so?
Because the traditional advice is to work a standard job for 40 years, ruthlessly cut out your morning latte, save 10% of your paycheck, and drop it into a mutual fund. But let's look at the math. Your wealth is tethered directly to your hourly wage or your salary.
Right, which grows over time.
Barely. Because you only have 24 hours in a day, your income has a strict mathematical ceiling. It's linear. It is the financial equivalent of riding a tricycle.
A tricycle?
Yes. No matter how hard you pedal, no matter how much you hustle at that job, your top speed is 3 miles per hour. You will cross the country eventually, sure, but you'll be a millionaire sitting in a wheelchair.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back on this wheelchair framing and, frankly, on the tragic dramatization of the traditional path.
It is tragic, though.
It's really not. Collins doesn't advocate for misery. He advocates for removing friction. The simple path to wealth isn't about dying of old age while hoarding pennies. It starts with a very active, immediate liberation, which is eliminating the debt that keeps people trapped.
Okay, sure, debt is bad.
It's the core issue. Consumer debt, massive student loans, huge mortgages that leave you house poor, these are what force people to stay in jobs they hate. Once you learn to simply live below your means, you open up the capacity to leverage the greatest wealth-building mechanism in human history, which is the stock market.
But relying on the stock market over a 40-year horizon is exactly what keeps you hauling stones.
Hauling stones?
Yeah, think about the story of Azir and Chuma from the text. The pharaoh tells these two young men to build pyramids. Whoever finishes first wins a life of luxury.
Right, the allegory.
Exactly. Azir takes the traditional approach. He starts immediately, manually hauling heavy stones one by one. After a few years, he's building muscles, he's working incredibly hard, but the progress is agonizingly slow. It's linear effort for linear result.
But Azar is actually making progress. He has stones on the ground. What does Chuma do?
Chuma disappears into his barn for 3 years. Azar actually mocks him because Chuma hasn't laid a single stone. He has zero visible wealth.
Exactly.
Wait, let me finish. Chuma isn't hauling stones. He is building a machine. He's building a scalable system of ropes, wheels, and levers. When Chuma finally brings his machine out, he accomplishes in 2 days what took Azar 2 months.
Okay.
He finishes his pyramid in 8 years, gaining total freedom while he's still young. Azar keeps lifting stones, refuses to change his system, and eventually dies of a heart attack 2 levels from the top. That is the fundamental difference between linear wage earning and exponential business scaling.
Look, it's a seductive allegory, I'll give you that. But let's look at how that actually plays out in the real world. For every Chuma who successfully builds a revolutionary machine, there are 10,000 people who spend 3 years in their barn building a contraption that completely falls apart the moment they try to lift a stone.
That's just poor execution.
No, it's statistical reality. Historically, the market trends upward. By owning the whole market through low-cost index funds tracking the S&P 500, you are bypassing the massive, frankly unacceptable risks of active business building.
Unacceptable?
Completely unacceptable for the average person. We see this constantly when people try to force a business. Look at Joe, the martial arts expert from the text. He followed the classic entrepreneurial dream, poured his life savings into opening a studio, and shut it down 10 months later.
Because he didn't solve a market need.
Exactly. He misjudged the need. Or take Ashlyn, who loved arts and literature and opened an independent coffee shop. It absolutely destroyed her. She was up at 4 in the morning, staying until 8 at night. Her social life died, her relationships collapsed, and after 3 grueling years, she had to close the shop and go back to a regular job.
Right. She built a job, not a system.
But that's what entrepreneurship usually is. It's statistically a path to burnout and bankruptcy. Index funds are the only reliable tool that actually protects the everyday person's sanity while they build wealth.
Okay, but Ashlyn and Joe didn't fail because entrepreneurship is inherently flawed as a mathematical concept. They failed because they violated the core laws of scale and need. Ashlyn built a business based on what she loved, not what the market demanded.
It's still a massive risk.
But let's zero in on this concept of risk, because this is where our fundamental divergence happens. You frame the 9-to-5 job as the safe route and entrepreneurship as the reckless gamble. I argue the exact opposite. Relying on a 9-to-5 job is an unacceptable risk because it completely violates the fundamental law of control.
Wait, how is a guaranteed bi-weekly paycheck a lack of control compared to a startup with zero revenue?
Because if you are an employee, you aren't driving the car. You are hitchhiking.
Hitchhiking?
Yes, you are entirely at the mercy of someone else's system. When you give up control of your income stream to a single employer, you have a single point of failure. You are one corporate restructuring, one bad quarterly earnings report, or one AI innovation away from zero income.
But
You are told you're safe, but they laid me off. They raised my health premiums. They cut my hours. That is the reality of millions. And look at the mechanism of the daily transaction you're making. You are trading 5 days of your life, Monday through Friday, just to buy 2 days of freedom on the weekend.
that's how society works.
5 for 2 is a mathematically terrible return on your most precious asset, which is your time.
Okay, but the true risk isn't having an employer. The true risk is the sheer complexity and grueling, life-consuming sacrifice required to build these so-called scalable systems. DeMarco's Fastlane explicitly requires giving 7 for 0.
Temporary sacrifice.
Temporary? You are working 7 days a week with no weekends, no holidays. It requires agonizingly long hours, dealing with volatile partners, and facing relentless obstacles. That is the exact mechanism that leads to the burnout we saw with Ashlyn.
Ashlyn didn't have a scalable system, though.
It doesn't matter. Meanwhile, Colin's Simple Path provides immediate, tangible peace of mind. By drastically increasing your savings rate, say saving 50% of your income, you aren't just locking money away for old age. You are building an immediate, liquid safety net for life shocks.
A safety net isn't wealth?
It's the foundation of it. If you experience that corporate restructuring you mentioned, your savings cushion absorbs the blow. You have the ultimate luxury, which Collins calls FU money. You don't have to work 80-hour weeks trying to keep a failing startup afloat to maintain it. You put your money in an index fund, let the collective productivity of corporate America do the heavy lifting, and you get to actually sleep at night. You keep your weekends right now.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're ignoring the timeline of exposure to macroeconomic risks. Yes, the simple path gives you a modest safety cushion, but the overarching strategy is like riding a tricycle cross-country and just praying the weather stays perfectly temperate for 40 years without a single disaster.
It's not a tricycle, it's a bulldozer. It just moves steadily.
It's completely exposed. You're assuming inflation won't outpace your conservative returns. You're assuming you won't face a catastrophic health issue that drains that safety net in a matter of months. And frankly, you're assuming you'll even live to see 65 to enjoy the final spike of that compounding curve.
You can't plan your whole life around worst-case health scenarios.
But the Fastlane's 7 for 0 solves this. It's a temporary state of intense friction. You work 7 days a week for 3 to 5 years so that you can spend the next 40 years doing 0 for 7, where every single day is Saturday. You concentrate the risk to compress the timeline.
But how guaranteed is that 0 for 7 paradise? You're acting as if a few years of hard work magically guarantees a multi-million-dollar exit.
It guarantees a higher probability if the system is right.
The simple path relies on the snowball effect of compound interest, which is an observable mathematical reality, not a lottery ticket based on survivorship bias. Let's look at the mechanics of dollar cost averaging.
Oh, here we go with the slow math.
It's real math. By buying consistently into the market, regardless of whether prices are soaring or crashing, you remove all emotional panic. In fact, when the market crashes, your static contribution automatically buys more shares at a discount. It mechanizes human psychology. You just keep adding fuel at a steady pace.
Right, slowly.
And then you apply the 4% rule, which is based on the Trinity study. If you accumulate 25 times your annual expenses, you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio in your first year of retirement, adjust for inflation each year after, and the historical data shows your money will outlast a 30-year period.
Okay, but
If your expenses are $40,000 a year, you built a $1 million portfolio, it accounts for inflation, it accounts for market dips, and it is a bulletproof, mathematically sound formula that doesn't require you to invent the next big tech platform.
now that's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently, because the math you just laid out is exactly the problem. It is simply too slow for anyone who wants to experience wealth while they actually have the vitality to leverage it.
You can be vital in your 50s and 60s.
But to save $1 million on a $60,000 a year salary requires decades of extreme frugality. You are systematically sacrificing the present for the future. The fast lane operates on an entirely different physical law of wealth generation, which is scale and magnitude.
Okay, define that.
To build wealth rapidly, you cannot rely on saving pennies from a linear wage. You have to build a system that decouples your intrinsic value from your time. Let's look at the mechanics of software. Take an independent app developer. They write the code for a game once.
Right.
The marginal cost of replication is essentially zero. It takes the exact same amount of physical effort to sell one copy of that app as it takes to sell 1 million copies. Because of a digital distribution system like the App Store, that developer can reach millions of people instantly.
If they get noticed.
Right, but if the magnitude, the value or entertainment provided, is high and the scale is global, that developer can earn $600,000 in a single month. $600,000. You cannot dollar cost average your way to that kind of wealth in your 20s. Magnitude and scale create exponential curves. You don't get there by buying fractional shares of an ETF, waiting for a 7% real return, and clipping coupons.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You bring up the app developer making $600,000 a month, but you are casually sidestepping a massive structural barrier that DeMarco himself acknowledges, the commandment of entry.
I'm not sidestepping it. It's a filter.
The core economic principle here is that if a system is easy to enter, competition and saturation will absolutely crush the margins to zero. Because the barrier to entry for digital distribution, like building an app, starting a dropshipping store, launching a blog, is so incredibly low today, you're entering a bloodbath of global competition.
Which means you have to be better.
Everyone wants to decouple their time from their money. Because the marginal cost of replication is zero for everyone, The expected value for the average entrant is also zero. You have to be incredibly exceptional or benefit from an extreme stroke of luck to be the one developer who makes $600,000 instead of the 99,000 developers whose apps are never downloaded once.
That's why you elevate your entry.
But indexing avoids this brutal battle of saturation entirely. You don't have to be the exceptional developer who beats the odds. By owning a total stock market index fund, you own a fractional piece of Apple, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. You profit from the labor of the most exceptional developers and executives in the world without taking on any of their individual concentrated risk. You buy the entire haystack rather than risking your life trying to find the needle.
That is a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to shift from being a consumer to a producer. Yes, the commandment of entry requires you to do something difficult. That is precisely the mechanism that protects your wealth once you build it.
If you build it.
Right, but if the barrier to entry is high, it forms a moat around your business. If you say, I don't know how to program, so I can't build software, the fast lane mindset dictates you educate yourself. You absorb the friction.
Most people don't have time for that.
Make time. The text talks about a guy who built a highly successful lead generation website for limousines. He had business degrees, but zero programming experience. He didn't just throw his hands up and go buy an S&P 500 index fund. He went to the library, taught himself code, and built a system that elevated him over the barrier of entry.
Good for him, but that's rare.
Old systems. We aren't just talking about software. We are talking about content systems, distribution, human resources, and real estate. When an author writes a book, that is a content system. They write it once.
Okay.
They don't have to wake up and write it every single day for it to generate royalties year after year. You absorb the intense labor up front, you build the machine in the barn like Chuma did, and then the system works for you while you sleep, you own the asset. That is what true freedom looks like.
I have to challenge this highly romanticized vision of business systems being truly passive. Let's look granularly at the mechanics of what managing those systems actually entails in reality.
You hire people.
Managing human resource systems. That means dealing with payroll taxes, constant employee turnover, legal liabilities, and interpersonal conflicts. Managing a product or a distribution system means constantly addressing customer complaints, dealing with supply chain failures, and adapting to competitor innovations.
That's part of the game.
DeMarco generously calls customer feedback the world's whispers, but in reality, it requires answering emails within minutes and providing exceptional, constant crisis management to prevent bad reviews from sinking your algorithm ranking. That is not passive. That is an incredibly active, highly stressful, unrelenting job.
Not if you build the system correctly.
A business is essentially in a constant state of entropy. If you aren't actively injecting energy into it, it decays. You are tethered to the machine you built.
Wait.
By contrast, index funds are the only truly passive income mechanism in existence. Once you set up automatic transfers from your checking account into a Vanguard fund, your active participation drops to zero. You don't manage employees. You don't answer customer service emails at midnight.
You just go to work at 9 a.m. every day.
But you don't pivot your entire business model because a search engine changed its algorithm. Index funds allow you to put the accumulation of wealth on absolute autopilot. The underlying companies are fighting the entropy for you. This frees you up to actually focus on a career you might genuinely enjoy, to prioritize your physical health, your family, and your daily life right now, without the crushing psychological burden of keeping a fragile business afloat.
Okay, but you are still tethered to the 9 to 5. If your primary engine for investing in those index funds is your day job, you are still bound by the mathematics of trading 5 days to get 2. Yes, keeping a business running takes effort. It requires fighting entropy. But as the creator and the owner, you control the levers of scale.
Control is an illusion in a free market.
No, it's not. You can hire an operator. You can sell the business for a massive multiple of its earnings. Your day job is fundamentally capped. You can only work so many hours. Your salary can only be negotiated so high.
But it's reliable.
If we step back and look at the deep architecture of what we've debated today, my position remains that index funds might be a perfectly fine vehicle for preserving wealth once you have it or for the later stages of life, but the creation of massive wealth, and more importantly, the reclaiming of your youth and your time, demands escaping the linear mathematics of the 9 to 5.
It demands shifting your identity.
from a consumer who just buys what the market dictates to a producer who provides immense, scalable value to the world. By aggressively building systems that satisfy the laws of need, entry, control, scale, and time, you gain the agency to compress decades of wealth accumulation into a few years. You do not have to wait 40 years to be free. And my summary is that while we celebrate the highly visible fraction of entrepreneurs who hit the jackpot, scale their systems, and sell for $100 million, we suffer from massive survivorship bias. We ignore the vast, silent majority who fail, taking their sanity, their relationships, and their life savings with them.
You're ignoring the ones who learn from failure, though.
The simple path is a reliable, democratic roadmap to wealth that relies on the proven macroeconomic growth of the entire market. By avoiding the friction of debt, maintaining a high savings rate by living simply, and harnessing the undeniable mathematical certainty of compound interest through low-cost index funds, financial independence becomes a high-probability outcome for virtually anyone. You don't need to invent a revolutionary machine. You don't need to fight constant business entropy, and you don't need to gamble your present well-being on a high-stress venture.
You know, it is deeply fascinating because underneath this profound disagreement regarding the mechanics of wealth, we are actually aiming at the exact same target.
We are. The ultimate objective for both philosophies isn't just money for the sake of money. It is financial independence, the complete uncoupling of our survival from unfulfilling labor, and the reclaiming of agency over our own time.
Precisely. We agree entirely on the destination. Where we face an unresolvable divergence is the vehicle we choose and the mathematical laws we trust to get us there. Are you going to build a high-horsepower engine, take on the concentrated risk, and drive at blazing speed through scalable business systems? Or are you going to rely on the steady, compounded, statistically proven patience of the global market?
Ultimately, the choice comes down to your personal tolerance for volatility, your desire for operational simplicity, and how you value your day-to-day peace of mind versus your desire for absolute control. There is so much more complexity and nuance to explore in the underlying mechanics of both the Millionaire Fastlane and the Simple Path to Wealth. As a listener, you have to look at your own life and decide which equation of time makes the most sense. Are you willing to wait for the math of compound interest to make you a millionaire at 65? Or are you ready to absorb the friction and build the machine now so you aren't stuck hauling stones for the rest of your life? We'll leave that to you to decide.